We're back from BSDCan. This week on the show, we'll be chatting with Brian Callahan and Aaron Bieber about forming a local BSD users group. We'll get to hear their experiences of running one and maybe encourage you to start your own. After that, we've got a tutorial on the basics of NetBSD's package manager, Package Source, and of course, answers to your emails and all the latest headlines on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 38, A Bug's Life, recorded May 21st, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're glad to be with you guys this week. We got a big show coming at you since we were out of town last week, or sorta anyway. But we'll kind of get right into that first. So last week was BSDCan. And of course, typically we do our usual wrap up, what happened, give you all the highlights, and etc. So Alan's going to be doing most of that today, considering I didn't end up making it there. I'll just give you the sad story really quick, but spent 2 days trying to get there. The first day, all my flights got canceled from Knoxville, and the second day they got me to DC, and then canceled the next 2 days worth of flights, and told me maybe I can get there Friday night or Saturday on standby, which of course the conference ended Saturday. Yeah. So at that point, I decided, I'd rather go home and sleep in my own bed, because also they were saying you could sleep in the airport 2 nights because we won't comp you a hotel or anything else because it's weather related. Yeah. So anywho, I ended up coming home and not making it out to the conference, but Alan, of course, did make it. So he'll have a lot to tell us about it. So how'd it go, Alan? I mean, I'm really jealous that I missed it. So I got to live through you here.
I kind of feel bad rubbing it in this way, but it was amazing. So I got a bunch of pictures. I think we mentioned a little bit the other week, but we had this thing called the Goat Boff. So at the conferences, Dan has started. I think they originally came from MeetBSD, the idea for it, but Dan started adding them as well, and it was a birds of a feather session. So it's just a bunch of people with a common interest in a room talking about it. They had them at FreeBSDCan as well with like the one about ZFS. It was a really good time. And so on the Tuesday before the Dev Summit started, Dan planned one where we'd all meet up at the Royal Oak Pub and hang out or whatever. But some things on Twitter resulted in that turning into a whole new thing. Sean Webb, who's been working on ASLR and PIE, some security-related memory management stuff for FreeBSD, he was giving a talk at BSDCan, and he was practicing it ahead of time, and he tweeted that his talk came out to about 44 minutes, and that's what he wanted. Now all he had to do was sacrifice 3.5 goats to the demo gods, so when he tried to demo it at the conference, it would work. And that turned into a whole thing, and about halfway through that thread, I was nominated to bring the goat, because I live in Canada, so I wouldn't have to try to take a goat through customs. And
of course, since you have access to goats, right?
Yeah, right. Dan found some goats for sale in Ottawa on Craigslist, but I went to Amazon and bought a stuffed goat and brought it.
Oh, okay.
And so we got everybody to get their picture taken with it. So here I have Matt Aarons with the goat. Here's Benedict, Drew, and I with the goat. Baptiste, he built the new package tools. Ryan, I forget who that is. Mark Lineman, Julio Marino, Jason Tubsta. Who else we got? Peter Hanstein, Colin Percival, Henning Brower.
Nice.
Michael Dexter. Bob Beck, teaching the goat to drink and doing horrible things to the goat. Jim Brown. Mariusz Zaborski, he works with PJD in Poland. Will Bachman from the BSD Talk podcast. And then, Matt Aarons again. David Maxwell.
So is this going to become a yearly tradition now? Or
kind of, except for we went even further. I sent the goat home with Benedict Rochling, so it'll be at EuroBSDCon.
Oh, okay.
And then he's going to pass it off to Henning or someone to take it to Asia BSDCan, where I can then pick it up again and bring it back to BSDCan next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so David Maxwell and then Matt Finney from iX and John Hickson.
Yep.
And Joseph Atkinson and Amitai Schleier. George Neville Neal and
a lot of these people we've interviewed before.
Yeah, George Neville Neal and Kirk McCusick. And I think you can see Sato-san in the background kind of hiding behind George.
Didn't want to get his picture with the goat.
Benedict and there's Ed Mast and Sato-san and John Baldwin and Warren Block and Olivier Robert. And there's... And then at the end, during the charity auction, my original plan was just to auction off the goat. But then when they suggested that we take it to Euro and stuff, I'm like, that's a great idea. We should do that. So instead, we auctioned off the rights to name the goat. And after a couple of rounds, actually, John Hickson won, and it is now named Groff, the BSD goat.
Nice. Nice.
Good
pick, John.
Yes. Mike Geiger, more Henning. There we go. Lots of good stuff. Also announced there was the deadline for submitting a paper to EuroBSDCan was yesterday. But because so many people wanted to, especially after how great BSDCan was, everybody's like, oh, I really want to go to Euro this year because of how great BSDCan was. They extended the deadline to June 2nd. So you have about an extra week or two to finish up those papers and get them submitted. They said they already have a bunch of really good ones, but a bunch of people were like, I'm stuck on an airplane and
flying.
I really do want to submit a great talk. So they extended the deadline.
Get those in, folks. Yes. Hopefully everyone's back now and can start getting those papers finished.
Yes. But yeah, there was quite a few people had travel problems. In addition to you, and then quite a few people arrived without their luggage and had to wait a couple days to have clean clothes. And then actually the keynote speaker from FlightAware, he managed to finally get to Toronto, but it was like after 11, and so he couldn't get from there to Ottawa until the next day. But he was speaking at like 9 a.m. the next day. So he actually went so far as to rent a car and drive the 5 hours from Toronto to Ottawa in order to make it in time to do the keynote. Because in his head, he said he was just picturing Dan having to say, the guy from the flight tracking company missed his flight and couldn't be here to do his keynote.
The irony.
Yeah, so he was worried, he was... didn't want Dan to be embarrassed and to mess up the conference or anything, and he really wanted to do it. And it was a really, really good keynote. And I actually managed to sit down with him for a few minutes and record an interview, which we'll have in a couple of weeks.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, now I'm actually going to have to go listen to the interviews since you did a few with Howie.
Yes.
Oh, man, I'm so jealous.
I guess the other big news was that I interviewed Benedict Reuschling from the documentation project, and he's also, I think, the head of the German translation team. He, I offered to interview him. He said yes, and then he was kind of getting insistent about it later that night. It's like, let's go do it right now. I'm like, oh, okay. Picked up my laptop and we went and found a quiet place, and then we had a great interview. And at the end, he was just waiting. You could tell for me to ask that thing we always ask at the very end. It's like, is there anything else you wanted to mention? And he did have something else he wanted to mention. He proposed and got accepted for me to get a FreeBSD documentation commit bit. So, yay me.
Hey, congratulations, Alan.
Yes, I actually posted that little clip of the interview up on YouTube since everybody wanted to see it, since I think it's probably the first time anyone got a commit bit on video.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But anyway, on to the actual content of the conference.
Yes. How did it go? I mean, I'm looking here. I suppose we can go right into the first headline with this. But at the Dev Summit, one of the first things that happened was they discussed FreeBSD 11 goals, which, again, really bummed because I wanted to be there for that and hear what was happening. So fill me in. What actually occurred during this portion?
Luckily, we always ask people to take notes at the Dev Summit, but most people don't. Luckily, Michael Lucas took notes for us. So on his blog, we have the notes from that session and a couple others if you check the show notes. But he says John Baldwin was leading the session, and we basically made a list on the chalkboard about the different things that we hope to have in time for FreeBSD 11, which is the new test suite from Julio Marino. A bunch more MIPS stuff that David Chisnell and Brooks Davis and a bunch of people are working on. Scott Long from Netflix wants to scatter gather mbuffs to basically streamline the network stack and make that faster. Ed Mast is working on LLDB, which is the debugger, kind of a replacement for GDB for the Clang stuff. And by 11, they want that to be fully working for everything, including possibly debugging the kernel. They want to have native cross-platform building and debugging, UEFI boot and install support. Glenn Barber and Baptiste are working on being able to package the base system so that instead of using like FreeBSD update, you would just get updates to your base system as part of the package already. And that has all the signing. And also it'll...
Did they go into how that would work exactly or any details?
It kind of mostly works, except for that package doesn't handle CH flags yet. And so there's certain files it can't delete. And also it might have to receive a couple modifications so that it doesn't, when you're doing an upgrade, currently the way package does an upgrade is delete the old files and then install the new ones. Well,
which kind of sucks for files in Etsy.
The bigger one would be, if you delete libc, then how do you then have the tools to install the new one? Or, if you delete the install and CP commands, how do you actually...
Whoops.
Yeah. So there's some stuff to be discussed there. And then we opened it up to the floor with a bunch of stuff people suggested that they might want to try to get in for 11. John Mark Gurney is working on AES GCM and support for IPsec. Sean, the goats are his fault web. I was working on the ASLR, or address space layout randomization, which makes it harder for if someone manages to exploit an application, they can't tell where in memory they are, so they can't. It makes it a lot harder to actually exploit something. Erwin Lansing is working on a bunch of DNS improvements. Everybody wants suspend and resume to work better.
Sure.
Some more changes to libc++. Working on OpenMP to make more programs be able to use multiple threads and multiple processors. And specifically, George Neville Neal was talking about there's been an offer to be able to get the Intel C compiler for FreeBSD. And whether anybody would actually be interested in doing that.
So what's this hot swap kernel upgrade?
Kload is a system where basically you would load load the new kernel into memory and then switch execution to that one, and basically allowed you to upgrade your kernel without rebooting. So that
would be fancy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Baptiste is working on replacing SendMail in the base system with the Dragonfly really basic mail thing, right? Just meant for sending mail rather than actually being a whole mail server. Lots of cleanups to encurses because there's 2 versions of encurses, and you almost always use the second one and migrate everything to the second one. Capsicum and Casper improvements, which are the sandboxing framework, and using Casper to allow basically every application to support DNSSEC properly instead of having to do it itself. George Neville Neal wants to work on a bunch of TCP performance improvements and just having broader review of all the TCP patches people are proposing. libuinet, which actually brings the entire networking stack into userland, which makes it much easier to test it and do profiling and stuff. More people working on 64-bit ARM, building packages for MIPS32 using the QEMU userland so that you can basically compile for things like MIPS on a regular AMD 64 so you can do it faster. Doing external toolchain improvements. Some people still need GCC and just being able to build FreeBSD on other stuff, and actually having GCC completely removed from the base system by 11.
Yep.
It was decided to kill off support for the Itanium architecture because there are currently 2 users of it, and it's not worth the effort.
I don't think too many people are crying about that.
Well, they don't sell them anymore, so it's like the 2 people that still have them. And if they wanted to keep working, they can do the work themselves.
Sure.
Userland dtrace, so that you don't. It's not just for. I think that's so that you don't have to be root to run it. I'm not sure exactly what they were getting at, but just more dtrace, which everybody agrees with. Also, Zen DOM 0. So actually being able to host virtual machines with Zen on FreeBSD, which apparently is almost...
I've talked about that for a while.
Apparently it's almost finished, and it'll definitely be ready in time for 11.
Cool.
64-bit KQ, which is the queuing mechanism for FreeBSD for doing asynchronous stuff in the kernel. Apparently Apple has that, and we just have to pull it in. Doing asynchronous send file, which is something that I think originally was being worked on at Netflix, but somebody else is going to pick it up and finish it. KD bus, which is apparently for desktop stuff.
The kernel dbus.
Finishing the new virtual terminal and the Nucons stuff and making that the default. KMS, DRM, and AGI improvements, getting the support for like the Haswell and newer Intel graphics.
Cool.
Being able to do encrypted kernel dumps. So, when your kernel crashes, being able to write the dump to an encrypted drive so that it's not just laying around with all your memory in it.
Yeah, it's pretty slick.
Warner Loesch talking more about doing stuff with NAND flash and NAND FS. Getting superpage support for more ARM and MIPS architecture stuff. Supporting multi-endian version of UFS. So it's not just the default endianness. You can use the other one as well. Stacy Sun wants to work on libdispatch, which gives you like a grand central dispatch kind of architecture.
Sure.
Baptiste and Brian Drury want to move more of the libraries in the base system into the private tree. So things like the OpenSSL that's built into the base system would move into a private directory. And so regular userland applications wouldn't see it. So only things that are built and bundled as part of FreeBSD would use that OpenSSL. And if you try to do something from ports, it'll pull in OpenSSL from ports, keeping those two separate, meaning that when they upgrade the one in the base system, it's not going to break your ports.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it'll solve that problem of keeping people's ports in sync with the base system and allow them to do handle security updates to OpenSSL more with less worry about breaking things. Further improvements to the etcsource.conf, which Warner and people have been breaking furiously the last couple of weeks. 64-bit Linux emulator, so that we can actually have run 64-bit Linux apps in the emulation mode or the compatibility mode.
Yeah. Of course, updating that at the same time, it looks like.
And then Union FS improvements, so that can be used more, and more stuff and more stuff. Improving the internal APIs that we use in PF so that we can track the newer versions of PF more easily, and also be able to deal with, if they change something and we don't want to expose that change, but we can still pull in all the other stuff. So we can basically keep our rule format while still getting all the new features. So basically, because OpenBSD only does backward support for like 6 months after a new release, whereas FreeBSD could be up to 5 years. We needed a way to be able to still pull in the newer stuff, but have a way to not break the older stuff. So there's some work going on for that. More IPv6 improvements. Beehive getting UEFI, which is the first step to being able to boot Windows. Importing VXLANs from OpenBSD. That's Rick Floyder's thing for basically doing, being able to have 16 million VLANs over UDP for when you're doing, multi-data center deployments. Colin wants reproducible release builds, basically removing things like usernames, host names, and timestamps, so that if you build the release a second time, the files come out with the same hashes.
I like getting rid of the timestamps in particular, so we can do fully deterministic.
Yeah, but if you get rid of the username and the hostname stuff as well, that would mean that if you built it and he built it, they would both come out the same. Which also is
that's great.
Is a security feature, right? If you can build the source code yourself and compare it against that it matches the thing, then you know that it's worked out properly. Or you can just, if you build it again 3 months later, you can tell that definitely nothing changed.
Sure.
Some more IPv6 security improvements, network stack back pressure so that it handles when you start sending it too much data. Network multipath and multipath TCP, stuff like that. A Capsicum shell, which would allow you to run any application with Capsicum, even if the application doesn't know anything about Capsicum. It would just basically be a wrapper that would go around the app and be able to drop privileges. And also being able to build images, like USB stick images, specifically for things like ARM and MIPS, without having to be root. which would be apparently a big thing. And then
that is a ton of
yes,
stuff.
and then in addition to that, they also proposed a change to the support model. Currently, the way it works is, every time we cut a new release, like, FreeBSD 9.3, which will be coming out soon, it's supported for a year, or if it's determined to be the extended support version, it'll be 2 years. And part of the problem there is that, 9.3 is coming out after 10.0, so it's basically only in maintenance mode now. There'll be some fixes and stuff, but it won't be getting a lot of new features. And it kind of makes it hard. Basically, they kind of want to avoid doing a 9.4 if that's going to add another year or two to the support lifetime. So instead, what they're proposing to do is base the support lifetime on the branch. So like when they start, 11.x, that will start the timer, and that branch will end support 5 years from when the branch is created, instead of doing it for a year or two after the last release. It's 5 years from the first release.
Dang.
And then also, as soon as there's a new point release, there's a 3-month gap, and then we drop support for the old release. So like currently, I think it's FreeBSD 9.1 is supported longer than 9.2. Because 9.1 was an extended support release, whereas 9.2... So 9.1 was good for 2 years, whereas 9.2 is only good for 1 year. And they were only like 8 months apart. So 9.1 actually lives longer than 9.2. And so their proposed change would mean, if they release a 9.3, after 3 months, everything older is not supported anymore.
Sure,
which will...
So you got to stay on the major branch.
Yeah, which will solve the problems they're having with keeping the ports tree working on all the different supported releases. This way, they can push out things like package-ng can happen a lot faster.
Sure.
And since, nothing really changes, nothing that will break your app changes within the branch, so upgrading from, 9.1 to 9.2 or 9.3 is really a small upgrade. Like, it doesn't require rebuilding all your packages or reinstalling anything. And so it should be fairly easy for someone to keep track of that without having, the regular headaches you have when you upgrade. It's only going between the branches. And this way, it also makes it easier for vendors because they get a guarantee that it's going to be 5 years rather than, a year or two after whenever we do the last release, which, at the beginning of the branch is never predictable. This way, it'll be, each branch will be supported for 5 years, and we'll do a new branch every 2.5 years.
That's some good stuff there.
So that I definitely think will be an improvement as well. And one of the interesting things they're showing in this graph here is that, while not intentional, that's basically what we've been doing. So it won't be that big of a change. It'll just, by making a couple of small changes within it, it will make life that much easier on the release engineering team, the security team, the ports team, everybody. And allow us to get updates coming out faster. Specifically, they're more likely to do more point releases on a branch if it doesn't mean extending the support lifetime.
Sure.
Like currently they probably wouldn't be planning an 8.5 because that would add another year or something onto that branch. But in the future, they would be able to do one like that, even at the very end of the lifetime.
Sure,
So,
even if only good for a couple months.
Right, like currently, I think it's 8.4 will be good for a year or two. And in that time, there's probably going to be some fixes that go into the stable branch there. And those basically will never be released because doing so would extend the lifetime. Whereas with the new system, they'd be able to cut one right near the very end saying, well, here's everything we got. And it's not really supported anymore, but you have all the fixes and that gives you that much more time to upgrade. In the show notes, I also have the slides for that and a bunch of, it talks about a bunch of the other stuff. And more proposed changes. For the changes to the release cycle, they actually looked at, what does Windows, Mac, and Debian and everybody else do. And they found that we're basically the only people supporting old point releases. And so if we stop that, it'll make our life easier. Okay, so next story.
Okay. that
was a long
wrap up, though, and I'm sure we'll be talking
that
about,
was just
stuff that happened.
Yeah, so that was just
in the coming weeks.
Just the first hour of the Dev Summit. We didn't even get into, then we had working groups on, ports and packages, a little bit more detail on cross-building and dealing with packaging the base system and stuff. There was one on ZFS. There was one on NAND flash. Tons of sessions. You know, most of which I couldn't be in because they were at the same time as something else.
Sure. You gotta pick and choose. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, we'll move on to our next story for the week. So I guess an SSH honeypot with OpenBSD and Kippo. So I guess everybody loves messing with script kiddies, right? So this blog post introduces Kippo, a SSH honeypot tool, and how to use it in combination with OpenBSD. It includes a step-by-step, or rather command-by-command guide, and some tips for running a honeypot securely. And you can use this to get a new zero-day exploits or find weaknesses in your systems. That sounds intriguing. OpenBSD also makes a great companion for security testing tools like this with all its exploit mitigation techniques that protect running applications. So definitely a good link here you want to check out and see how to do that.
Yeah,
sounds
basically,
like a neat utility.
You can set it up on a strange port or whatever, and then use PF to forward port traffic from port 22 to that. And it basically runs in a CH route, and this way you see all those people that are always trying to hack on your SSH with fake username and passwords. If you let them in and put them in a CH route, see what they do.
Yeah.
Yes. And then it comes with all the standard warnings about, hey, you're actually purposely letting someone in your system. Be careful with that. But, you know, it's kind of interesting to see what all those bots are actually trying to do to your system.
Sure.
And I imagine most of those bots would be very surprised to get access to an OpenBSD system. Because you don't very often see an OpenBSD system where
if you name OpenBSD exit now.
You don't normally see an OpenBSD with a username and password admin that lets you in. But it was always funny when people I'd see when I sold shell accounts and like people would pay for access and then try to exploit the system, and they would try like Linux exploits on my BSD system. I'm like, you realize that's never gonna work, right?
Well, it confuses them.
But it could definitely be interesting to see what comes out of that. So,
yeah, that's definitely neat. That would be entertaining to see some logs if anybody's run that. Just to kind of see some of the failed attempts. But cool. So next up, NetBSD Foundation has released a financial report, which we have the link here in the show notes. So they've posted their 2013 financial report. It's pretty much a no-nonsense page, only the hard numbers.
The regular spreadsheet that you see from any company, basically.
Yep. So I guess in 2013, they got a total of $26,000 income in donations. And the rest of the page shows the details, how they spent it on hardware, consulting, conference fees, legal costs, and anything and everything else. So, of course, with that, we'll mention, be sure to donate to whatever BSDs you like and use.
For sure.
So next year, that number will increase.
Exactly.
Cool. So what's the next story we have? Something about encrypted NAS with OpenBSD?
Yes. So this one's, most people would use FreeNAS or just a vanilla FreeBSD to build a NAS. But in this one, they're talking about doing an encrypted NAS with OpenBSD. The big difference is the way OpenBSD's encryption, full disk encryption works, you don't have to have an unencrypted boot partition. So even your kernel is encrypted. And has verification on it so that it can't be modified. That's one thing that's kind of missing in FreeBSD. So they talk about how you can actually build your NAS using OpenBSD and be able to have the fully encrypted system like that.
That's nice.
The downside is that obviously you don't get ZFS. But if you just need a small one, especially if you have smaller hardware and more limited RAM, this could be an interesting alternative, especially if you're very paranoid.
Definitely. So there's a lot of information in this write-up as well, background information on NASs in general.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. Even if you're not interested in building one on OpenBSD, just reading some of their general security stuff and applying that to your FreeBSD system or whatever NAS you have is actually a really good idea. So I recommend it as a read to anyone, but especially if you want to do what it's about. But it's still a good read even if you're not interested in building a NAS at all.
Cool. Well, that's a good segue into our next spot where we discuss this week's sponsor, of course, iXsystems, the parent company behind FreeNAS. Yes. And we got a ton of links this week, stuff that they've been doing. These guys never rest, man, even during BSD.
Yeah, I know.
Some of the folks are out there.
Yeah, they had a
lot of stuff happening.
There was Craig doing continuous integration stuff, John Hickson for FreeNAS, and then they had Matt Finney running their little table and giving away PCBSD CDs and all the fun stuff. But the newest thing to show off this week is what they call the Terrafiler. And it's I'm showing the picture of it now.
Sick.
It's massive. Basically, it's two 3U controller nodes, each that holds 16 drives and has 8 external SAS controller ports. And then each of those two is wired to 4 Supermicro JBODs with 45 drives each. And each of those has dual expanders and split backplanes so that it can... So everything is, this way every drive in each one of these 4 JBODs is actually wired to different controllers in each of the 2 controller heads. So no matter what piece of gear dies, you can still access all the drives from the remaining bits. Whether, a whole head goes down or a specific controller card goes out or a backplane dies or whatever.
That's just slick.
Yeah. Each of the 2 controller nodes has a Chelseo T5 quad port 10 gigabit NIC, 256 gigs of RAM, dual Intel E5 2650 V2s, which is like 24 or 32 cores at 2.6 gigahertz. Each one has an LSI 9207 8i controller plus 2 9206 16E controllers. So that's an internal one that'll handle 2 4-port mini SAS connectors and 2 external ones that'll handle 4 external ports each. So 8 external ports total.
Dang. So what's the total capacity?
In total, that gives you 194 drives, which they filled with 4 terabyte disks, which is 776 terabytes.
Dang.
Yeah. And each of those controller heads also has a pair of Zeus RAM dedicated ZIL devices, which is basically a PCI card loaded with RAM and a battery backup. And they're mirroring onto that. The speed is just ridiculous, I bet. And the reason they built it, science.
Of course.
Let me jump to that. They're actually testing. They're actually testing a new anti-vibration rack. Let me just set this up. I don't know if the audio is actually working, but I have the link in the show notes. But as you can see, they got their team set up as a band playing in front of the rack, the anti-vibration rack, and they're going to see just how well that works.
They're going to torture that rack and make sure it's up to snuff.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Now it makes sense why Matt Olander's title at IX is Chief Science Officer. And the other exciting news is that the TrueNAS has achieved VMware Ready status. So it's actually certified for running inside VMware now. So if you work at a big enterprise where you require that to be able to use a product, the TrueNAS is ready to go now. It says here, by using TrueNAS with vSphere 5.5 Enterprise, you can benefit from automatic compression and the self-healing file system and all the fun stuff that you get from a ZFS and TrueNAS.
And of course, they already have their pictures up from this last week from BSDCan.
BSDCan and FOS, a second conference they were at. So yeah, a ton of pictures and some more YouTube videos as well.
Excellent. Well, of course, while we're talking about them, we do need to mention the URL.
Yes.
So again, that URL, iXsystems.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you, and we'd appreciate that. We'll be back in just a moment with our feedback and questions for the week. Okay, we're joined this week by Brian Callahan and Aaron Bieber. Good to have you guys with us.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good, doing good. We're going to be talking a little bit about forming local BSD users groups, or bugs. So, of course, the same question we ask everyone, though. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you first got into BSD, and I'll go left to right here. So Brian is on the left of my screen. So, Brian, go ahead and get us started.
All right, sure. So I guess for me, it all started about 2006 when I went to college. I brought a laptop with me as a spare. And Windows XP didn't have audio, didn't have Wi-Fi, something like that, where not everything was supported. So I tried probably every single Linux distro that came on CD, and the same problem. Either I had sound or I had wireless, but I didn't have both. So I think I searched for something like free operating system, not Linux, and FreeBSD came up. So that was 6.1. I tried that, and everything worked. So I figured I might as well hang out here for a while. I hung out until the day I found out that OpenBSD was supporting those little Indian MIPS boxes. I got a handful of those and moved over to that, and have been there ever since.
Sweet. How about you, Aaron?
Well, kind of started. I don't remember time frame, but it was probably late 1990s. Started getting into it. Used OpenBSD for a firewall, and me and a couple of friends played around with it a lot. We played with FreeBSD as well, but it was usually OpenBSD that we'd go to. Then I kind of left it for a long time and focused on Linux, and came back right around the time Devious started, the shell hosting company, and that got me back into everything. And I decided that I was going to contribute to a BSD. I hadn't specifically picked one, but finally, OpenBSD had all of the stuff that I wanted. The base was just what I needed. Decided to stick with that one. That's how I got here.
Cool.
So I guess the next question is, what was the timeline between you just being a regular user and eventually becoming a developer? Brian?
No, so for me it was almost exactly 1 year from my first submission, which was terrible, to actually getting my OpenBSD account. And I kind of just went through a whole bunch of ports through the little Indian MIPS boxes and just fixed the ones that I wanted to use myself. We did that enough times, and they were tired of committing this stuff for me, so they let me do it now.
And Aaron?
Pretty much the same. I started with the Node.js port. It was way outdated, and for my job at the time, I needed a more up-to-date version, so I ported that, or updated that port, and sent it to the mailing list enough times that they got tired of me asking them to do it and pestering them. So.
I guess mine was about the same. I was a user for 13 years, and then I started writing stuff for the documentation exactly a year ago, and then I got my account last week.
Very cool. So, Brian, first up, what's your local bug? How big is it? And how to get started? Tell us a little bit about that.
All right, so we're at NiceBug, the New York City BSD user group. We're about 10 years old now. We celebrated our decade meeting, if you will, back in December. Started the 2004 Linux World Expo, the last one they had there. A bunch of people, I was not part of it at the time, but a bunch of people got together and held a BOF for the BSDs and went around and tried to solicit as many people to come to their upcoming meetings. And a whole bunch of people showed up, and we've been going pretty strong ever since. How many people are in the bug is hard to tell because we don't do attendance. We don't have official memberships per se. People are free to come and go as they want. But we definitely pack, whatever room we're happy to be in for a meeting. It'll always be packed and then some.
That's cool. And you, Brian, and go ahead and speak up a little bit because your audio is still a little bit on the low side.
Sure. Let's see if I can figure out how to start.
No, yours is fine. Sorry. He meant Aaron. He misspoke.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so just speak up a bit if you can.
Yeah.
Cool. So my bug is the Colorado BSD users group, and it started a month ago, I think, or about then. And it started because I was jealous that Brian had a sweet BSD users group. Not really. I just want to, get more people involved in BSDs and make them more awesome. They're fantastic, and they deserve to be, you know, have a lot of people that are into them. So that's my main goal with it, and where I ultimately want to take it. I have a surprisingly large number of members given the time frame that it's been going. There's 7 officially now that are members here, and then there's in the Google Plus community that I started for it. There's 16 now.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Colorado's a good place. I can think of like 5 major FreeBSD developers right off the top of my head that are around there.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully I can get in touch with those guys and we'll get some cool stuff happening.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I guess, Brian, first, how often do you have meetings, and what kind of places make good places to have a meeting?
So our meetings are once a month, the first Wednesday of the month, 6:45 p.m. in New York. As for what places, we jumped around a bit. We've had meetings at the Soho store, the Apple Soho store, back when they still let us. Recently, we've been at a bar and pub, which has been real nice. I think places that are good are places that are easily accessible. People aren't trying to find where to go. It's kind of just there. And definitely places that either serve good food and have a bar, or are close to a place that serves good food and has a bar. Because realistically, with meetings being on Wednesdays, you're asking people to take an evening, a dinner out of their month every month to come. So it would be nice that they have a good place to socialize and eat, either during or after.
Yep. And Aaron, what's your plan for when to have meetings?
Right now we do them at a coffee shop, and they're officially scheduled for the first and last Wednesday of every month, which was a terrible idea on my part. I just kind of picked it randomly. It's proven to be kind of difficult to get 2 talks consecutive, mostly because I'm the only one writing them right now, so that's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
One of the other members, though, is doing a talk on SSH, so that should be pretty cool. And we'll see. I'm probably going to switch to something else besides the first and last Wednesday of the month. I don't know what it is yet.
Well, cool. So what all is involved in creating the local users group, such as like websites, getting the word out? How do you guys handle that, Brad?
We have a lot of people who are willing to do the work. So even though I said we don't have official membership, which is true, we have what we call admin, which are the people who kind of form the continuity of NiceBug. These are the people that you see every month at the meetings, are active on our mailing lists, or otherwise just tend to be around and do all the legwork that's involved in pulling this off every month.
Mm-hmm.
It's the people who are willing to do it, I guess. We have somebody who runs our website, other people who go out and find speakers, and other people who want to be involved. And it's a community effort. And even though people come and go, there's enough continuity that it all holds out.
Cool. How about you, Aaron? How do you guys get the word out and get your group going?
So far, it's been a lot of Twitter and Google Plus stuff. Those seem to be the most active means for getting the info out. Also, I had there's a local group here in Pueblo that I kind of piggybacked off of. So I started out with some people that were willing to come in the beginning. So it's we'll see. I haven't been around long enough to know what are the best methods for communicating what the bug is doing and all that jazz. But I have all of them, mailing list and everything.
So I guess, that brings us to what are some of the challenges involved in creating a bug, other than maybe just at the beginning getting it off the ground and getting enough people to show up and enough speakers.
Oh no!
OpenBSD just fell over.
Dude, took a dive.
So Brian, what are some of the other challenges involved with running a bug?
So I wasn't there when NiceBug founded. I didn't come into the picture until about 2010. But the day-to-day thing, I guess the challenge really is to find people who are willing to do it every day, because this is not we meet once a month and then nothing happens for 30 days and then we all meet again. Mm-hmm. There's constant, always work being done, especially for a place like NiceBug that also runs conferences, hopefully every year going forward. Yeah. But we've put on 5 in our 10-year history. So there's always work to be done. And we would like more people to be involved, but I think we have enough people that if no one else shows up and does it, we can still get our jobs done and get good meetings every month.
So yeah, that's one of the things, I guess, for a new group is not just getting enough attendees, but getting enough people on like an admin team that you have. It's not all on one person to make sure that the meeting happens every month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Making it bus proof. So
yes,
right now, if I got hit by a bus, it would stop. So I gotta fix that.
Cool. Well, with most users and developers collaborating online, what would you say is the advantage to meeting in person every now and then?
Definitely the physical meeting people. Yeah. For one, you become friends with them, actual friends, and they no longer become these names you see on the mailing lists or people you talk to on IRC occasionally. They become people. And it also helps to undercut trolling a lot. And we definitely see that on our mailing list. You're not going to find the random drive-by troll, because the only people who are going to be on those lists are people that we also know, and that helps a lot.
Well, yeah, sure. Email's not always an effective communication method, and when you write something and someone reads it differently than you meant it when you wrote it, whereas when you're in person, you can, that subtlety comes across a lot better. And almost every dispute that happens on a mailing list can be resolved with 5 minutes in person.
Definitely, and a few drinks.
That's sure not even required, but yes.
No, it's required.
Well, how about you, Aaron? What's the biggest advantage you guys are seeing to meeting together?
It's a probably exchange of knowledge. There's a lot of things that other people can teach everyone. So getting together and getting those channels going is so far has been very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the other things is that, when you're in person, you kind of have more of a captive audience. If you get someone to look at something for you, they're looking at it right then, not you mail it to them and maybe get a response the next day. And just the interactivity there can just, the fact that zero latency makes a big difference sometimes. So yes. Yeah, so how do you go about finding more people that would be interested in joining, especially, the people that haven't already heard about it? Or basically, when trying to get people from the BSD community to come out to a user group is one thing, but how do you get people to become part of the community?
So NiceBug is well positioned within the other user groups in New York City. And of course, New York City being such a large place, there's a user group for everything you can think of, and then some. But we've managed to position ourselves in a way that we don't actually get only the BSD faithful to come to NiceBug. In fact, if you were to ask at a random meeting, probably half the people there, if not more, either don't run BSD or used to run BSD but don't anymore. We've positioned ourselves, we're the place that people who want to go and learn something and be with the serious technical people come out to. And we've really prided ourselves on being that learning environment. And that helps get people out, whether or not they use BSD.
Do you have anything to add, Aaron?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, how about this? How difficult is it to find speakers to give presentations, tutorials, or QA sessions? And also, what kind of sessions do you think people enjoy the most?
Finding people is easy. New York City is a huge place, and we have developers from all the projects. And if it ever gets to a low point, we know a lot of people, or they stick me and have me do another meeting. That happens too, which I'm okay with. What was the other half of your question, Chris?
What kinds of things do people seem to enjoy most? More presentations, tutorials, or like Q&A, or how do you guys mix it up?
So the meetings that get the most attendance are application meetings. I guess the big famous one around Nicebug lore is the Puppet meeting. If you ever come to New York, ask somebody about the Puppet meeting. It'll be eye-opening. But they're not necessarily the best meetings. They're just the meetings that draw the most people.
Sure.
For me, the best meetings are the ones where you go in, someone who's way smarter than you talks for an hour, you pick up maybe 8% of what they say, and you walk out 3 times smarter. I guess examples of those meetings are early on, Nicebug had a porting OpenBSD to the PA RISC architecture, which was a very good meeting. And just a couple months ago, we had an NYU professor give a meeting on random number generators. And,
oh, nice.
You know, that was one of those meetings where you have to read the white paper that we posted on our website, which is his published article on this stuff, before you could even walk in and hope to get anything out of it. But those are the ones, in my opinion, that are the most successful, because they're the ones that people get the most out of.
Sure. Well, how about you, Aaron? It's probably a little different being in Colorado. Do you find it troublesome to find speakers to give presentations?
Well, yes and no. So far, I've given all of them, so kind of cheating. But Brian just gave me a lot of good ideas, so I think I'm going to try to approach some of the universities and see if I can get someone from there to do some talks. So we'll see.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, thanks, man.
No problem.
So, is there anything you can do to help retain interest in the group and get people to keep coming? Right? You know, like you said, the Puppet meeting brought out a lot of people that don't normally come out. And what can you do to try to keep those people?
Well, I think the Puppet meeting is a bad example for getting people to stay, because applications aren't necessarily BSD specific. So people who want to know something about that application show up, and we probably never hear from them again.
Right, but is there something you could do to try to maybe get them convinced?
So I think one thing that we pride ourselves at Nicebug that is very effective for this is we don't do sales talks.
Right.
Like I said before, these are people who are taking a night out of their month to come and join us. So if we're going to have people do that, we're going to put on meetings that people are going to enjoy and people are going to learn something from. So we've been very strict with not doing sales talks. We do a sales talk anywhere. You know, we really go out of our way to make sure that we have dynamic, interesting speakers that are going to talk about BSD specifically, but more about how to expand your technical knowledge. And I think that's what gets people to come back.
I guess, Aaron, you're just getting started, but I guess for you that maybe is even more important. How do you get people to keep coming back next month?
Yeah. My backup plan is free pizza, so I feel confident that will work.
Yeah, free pizza is always a staple.
Yeah.
That'll help.
Cool. Well, anything else you guys like to mention before we go?
Thank you guys for the interview.
Yeah, I would say if you have any interest in coming out, come out. It doesn't have to be Nicebug, it could be anybody.
Yep. Sure.
You'll meet a lot of interesting people, and I think even more broadly, it helps to retain interest in BSD, not just in the individual user group, because you'll finally meet people who are developers, who are power users, who are interested in passion, really passionate for this stuff.
Yeah, and
you don't get to see that sitting around every day at your computer reading a mailing list.
Yeah, you don't feel it through the mailing list, but in person, you kind of catch the enthusiasm. At BSDCan, we called it, recharging your BSD battery. You got you all hyped up, and it's like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to do all this stuff. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I saw TJ added a little bit of BSD Now trivia to the end of the thing here, and says, well, we met Brian really early on in the show when he wrote a blog post about our first episode. And, we've taken a bunch of his suggestions, and he also helps review a lot of our OpenBSD tutorials, and we're very thankful for that.
Cool. Yes. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the show with us today. Really appreciate it. And, of course, we want to encourage people, no matter where you are, if there's a bug within driving distance, have you get out there, go meet some other folks. I mean, it'll be well worth the time.
Definitely try it, because you will get hooked. And then you'll be
you will.
Then you'll be going to conferences too, and it changes everything.
Especially free pizza.
Yes.
Well, thanks, guys. We appreciate it, and we'll be back in just a moment with our tutorial.
Thank you.
So way back in 1997, you guys remember those days? Well, back then, NetBSD forked the FreeBSD port system to create their own project. It was going to be called pkgsrc, or package source. In NetBSD tradition, portability was a major goal. So the tutorial today is being done on a FreeBSD system, and we're going to be looking at how package source can be used on a large number of platforms. It offers both binary packages and a way to compile software from source. We're mainly going to be demonstrating how to do it by source, since binary packages may not be as up-to-date or even available for all platforms.
And it's just less interesting.
Yeah, true, true.
I installed it.
Yeah, okay, that was quick, and moving on. So at the time we're doing this tutorials, binary packages are not cryptographically signed either. So we're going to be first taking a look at getting package source over CVS, which is probably the most secure method right now. You can also fetch it over FTP and untard if you want to. And we're going to take this away by checking it out from CVS and running the bootstrap command. So take it away, Alan.
Yeah. So the first thing we need to do is check out a copy of package source from the NetBSD CVS tree. So do that. As you can see, it's very similar to the FreeBSD ports tree in the fact that it's laid out in, directories like archivers, comms, etc. But one of the differences is that it has this thing called bootstrap. So unlike the FreeBSD ports tree that relies on having certain tools already built into the base system, like the compiler and the actual packaging tools, whether that's the old package install stuff or the newer package ng, package source bootstraps everything, so it doesn't assume your system provides anything at all. So when we run this little bootstrap script, it's going to actually build for us the basic tools that are required. GCC3. What else does it need? The digest tool that it uses to check checksums on stuff, because it doesn't assume that your system provides the SHA-256 tool, and all that kind of stuff. And the actual package tools that will actually let you have a database of what packages are installed and so on. So this is going to quickly configure, compile, and install those, and then we'll have a working package source system. One of the other things is the bootstrap tool can be run in unprivileged mode if you just provide -- unprivileged, and this will actually allow you to install applications without being root. So if, for example, you have access to a machine at school where you don't have root, but machine doesn't have tmux and you want tmux, well, you can grab package source, run it in unprivileged mode, and then compile tmux and install it to your home bin directory, and then you'll have tmux. And the nice thing about NetBSD package source is it's very portable. It runs on Net, Free, and OpenBSD, Linux, Solaris, SmartOS, Mac OS X. I think you can even run it under Cygwin in Windows. It gives you everything you would need no matter what operating system you're on. It's very powerful in that way. Because we checked it out from CVS, there's also instructions in our tutorial here on how to update it. So, a couple of weeks from now, you want to grab newer versions of some of your packages. It also provides bits from the package source guide that explain some stuff you can put in your .cvsrc to add extra flags to the default commands like checkout, update, diff, etc. Now that that's built, all we have to do is set our path environment variable to include user pkg, which is where package source installs all of its stuff. You'll want to add this to your regular shell so it happens every time. But now, if we just go to misc/tmux, we can see the directory looks very similar to how it does on FreeBSD, except for the files are named slightly differently. Now, if we just run bmake, because again, package source isn't going to, instead of depending on your system make, which could be, GNU make under Linux, or fmake under older FreeBSD, or bmake under newer, we can just run bmake install clean and clean dependencies, and it will install everything we need and give us a working tmux. So we just give it a minute here. It's downloading tmux, configuring it, and then it'll compile it, and then we'll have tmux. And that's pretty much all there is with package source. It works very nicely. Just give it a minute here to finish compiling. Oh, it needs libtool as well, so it's automatically resolving your dependencies for you and everything you need. And also, it has support for an audit framework. So we'll get to that in a minute once this is done compiling. But what it lets you do is actually pull down something like VUXML and check, are any of the packages I have installed known to be vulnerable? And then you can deal with those. There's also a separate tool called lint package source, which rather than checking for vulnerabilities, just checks if there's a newer version. So, that newer version may be an enhancement rather than a security fix, but allows you to track what you need and scan all of your stuff. Then you can just run bmake update and it will install the required updates. There's also options, similar to how there's an options framework in FreeBSD. So if you read the tutorial, you can see how you can do make show options and decide, for example, do you want to build Tor with threads or not? Then you can just, in your make.conf for package source, you can say, default options, disable threads, or whatever way you want to do it. So tmux should be almost done compiling here. But yes, the ability to be very portable like this and to be able to be run as non-root makes it very powerful. And it's very handy on machines where you don't have root, but you still want some tools. Okay, so now that tmux is done, if we do which tmux, we'll see that it gets installed to kind of a non-default location, user pkg bin tmux. The other advantage to this is it can deal with the fact that maybe there's already a version of tmux on your system, it's just outdated. And again, this way you can have whatever you need. And then if you don't want it anymore, you can just package delete tmux. And now it's gone. Now, if we can run the package admin stuff, we can fetch the package vulnerabilities list. And if we run it, there won't be anything vulnerable because all of our stuff is brand new and we don't have very much installed, but that would give us that if we had it. And that's about it for package source. So we'll be back with our next segment.
Okay, well, thanks for the tutorial, Alan. And before we go into our weekly news roundup, we, of course, want to mention our other sponsor on the show this week, the guys over at Tarsnap, Colin Percival.
Yes.
And one of the things we want to mention ahead of time, I'm not sure if we mentioned a couple weeks ago, but Tarsnap is available in the ports tree and, of course, via packages if you're using package ng on FreeBSD. So you can grab that out of the PCBSD repo as well. I'm sure we've had it built for quite a while now.
And you just install that and hook it up to your account on his website, and you can start backing up your files. All you got to do is keep your crypto key safe. Because
yes. Do not lose your password, because if you lose that, you cannot get it back.
Yes.
Colin is not keeping a copy of it. And
exactly.
if he doesn't have a copy of it, he can't be forced to give it up if somebody tries to get a hold of your data.
All your data is encrypted before it leaves your machine, and they have no ability to rescue it. So don't lose the keys.
That's what you want in a backup service. Exactly. So definitely check out, of course, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Take a look at how it works. And, of course, it's open source. So if you're paranoid, and you should be when you're trusting your data to some other system somewhere out in the world, you want to take a look and see what it's doing. So you can actually verify it yourself, see that it's doing exactly what it says it is. So you use Tarsnap, Alan. How's it working out for you?
Great. It just magic happens and your files are safe.
There you go. That's what you want to back up.
And because it's differential, it's easy to do while you're on the road. You can even tarsnap your and save that bit of source code you wrote while you're at a conference.
Nice.
When you're traveling is when you're most likely to lose your laptop.
Definitely. So again, check out tarsnap.com/BSD Now and let them know that we sent you. Okay, well, we'll be... go ahead.
So next up, we have the news roundup.
Okay, yep. So next up, we have our weekly news roundup. So first item we have this week, FreeBSD periodic mails versus monitoring. Oh, this is interesting. So if you've ever been admin for a lot of FreeBSD boxes, you've probably noticed that you get a lot of email, of course. So this article we're linking here tells about all the different email alerts, cron emails, and other reports you might end up getting, as well as how to manage them. Everything from bad SSH logins to Zabbix alerts, it all adds up pretty quickly. So it's going to highlight some of the periodic.conf file and FreeBSD's periodic daemon, as well as some of the third-party monitoring tools you can use to keep track of your servers. So this is definitely good if you have more than a couple systems that you have to administrate.
Yeah, he says, so with the place he was taking over operations of a 75-server FreeBSD deployment, and he said that the way they were doing it before, they were spending about 10 man days per week just feeding and caring for the FreeBSD servers, and his goal was to get that down to 1 day a week. And he kind of talked about some of the things he did, to
make that happen.
Yeah.
Well, definitely. Well worth reading that. Again, if you're a sysadmin and have any kind of FreeBSD boxes out in the wild, you want to take a look at that.
Because it's definitely possible. I do about 85 FreeBSD servers by myself. FreeBSD makes it so easy to do that, too.
Sure. You can automate all that.
So next up, yes.
Next up, something about OpenBSD I hear, doing some cool stuff with routing domains.
So this is OpenBSD routing domains, which actually lets them... you have multiple routing tables and actually deal with different ways. And so it actually covers here. It was, he says he bought a Cisco ASA 5510 and received 2 Class C or /24 networks from the IT department. And and then he had the range that the company's actual routers were on. And he was using the routing domains to actually pass traffic through. And there's some nice network diagrams going on here. He's even he designed this tutorial for us. So the client machines hanging off the end of this machine, his OpenBSD machine, are named Alan and Chris.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yes. And the way he did the routing domains, he actually has us having the same IP address.
I was going to say, what's up with that?
Because they're separate routing domains, so that they don't actually conflict with each other. That is interesting.
Nice.
They should do some interesting things. And he's got all the details on how he set it up on top of the different diagrams and all the fun stuff. It looks like he named the machine TJ that he did the routing on.
Nice call out to TJ there too. That's awesome.
Yeah, but it basically shows how to use the routing domains in PF. So that's a cool tutorial. Thank you for that.
Definitely. Yeah, thanks for sending that in. Cool. Well, next up, I'll let you go through a little bit of this, Alan, so I can do the PCBSD roundup afterwards. But LibreSSL, the good and the bad. Looks like we have a new blog article about that.
Yeah, this is from April 27th, so it's a little older, but it's talking about LibreSSL and how that's coming about and what they think some of the good and the bad things are. And it covers a whole bunch of different things. He says, for those of you that don't know it, OpenSSL is at the same time the best and worst SSL TLS library there is. It's the best and most popular, and it's utter junk. Right? But there's not really anything better, and that's kind of the goal of the LibreSSL project. I guess we don't have the video this week, but next week we will have, or you can go find it on YouTube. There's the video of the Bob Beck's talk about the first 30 days of LibreSSL and what they've done so far, what their plan is, what they've accomplished, and specifically some of the gotchas. We've seen efforts to port it to Linux and FreeBSD and so on already, and some of those are kind of naive in that, when they don't have a function, for example, in OpenBSD they use this function called like explicit B0, and basically it means don't let the compiler optimize out the fact that we're overwriting all of this RAM with zeros because it used to have secret keys in it. And if, as part of your porting, you just alias that to the regular B0, then that's not going. You're actually hurting the security of the product. And so you have to be careful with some of these porting efforts and make sure that it's not just some guy who's worried about getting it working rather than getting it working correctly.
Sure.
But yeah, even in that talk and in this blog post here, they're talking about in OpenSSL, the crypto is good. It's just the rest of it that needs work.
So like the implementation all around
and
it.
The protocol handling and stuff. And then it also talks about the LibreSSL pitfalls. Part of that problem is that LibreSSL aims to be a drop-in replacement for OpenSSL, so it has to keep the horrible APIs that OpenSSL has.
Yeah.
And in the future they might add their own, but in order to achieve the goal of being a drop-in replacement, they have to keep supporting those APIs.
Well, cool. Well, next up, of course, we'll have our weekly PCBSD digest, and we have quite a bit to talk about this week. So we had a blog post this last week talking about some of the new stuff we've been working on for 10.02, which we're targeting sometime in June. And the big thing is that we have basically gutted and kind of changed the PBI system to replace it as more of a front end for package-ng. So when you pull down the next update to 10.02, or if you're on the Edge branch, you've probably already got this, but it'll convert your PBIs into the package system the first time you run the App Cafe. So part of that is the App Cafe got redesigned. So the App Cafe now is a fully featured graphical interface to packages. It can manage not only the PBI formatted packages, but your regular package-ng packages as well. So all 20 some odd thousand ports and applications and libraries and anything and everything that's in the ports tree is now available via the App Cafe, and can be done via the GUI and upgraded and managed and locked, and it supports a lot of the cool stuff that package-ng does. Cool. So if you read the blog post, there's some explanation about the PBI system, the reason we made some of the transitions there, why we're doing it, how it works. The PBI commands will still all be there. They will just act more as a human interface in front of the package command and add some extra metadata and features that desktop users expect, such as MIME types, desktop files, etc. And of course, does some cool stuff with jails as well. So it's going to go into a lot of the details on different ways to install software, and hopefully it'll clear up any possible confusion. One big benefit we saw immediately with this change is now we only have one application that does all the package management on the system. You don't have PBI managers and then package managers and then some stuff from source. And yeah, it just puts it all in one spot. Makes it really easy to use and interact with all sorts of applications on your system. So something else I just added to the notes here, though. At the moment, I'm actually working on support for doing full disk encryption with Jelly, and hopefully using Grub. Grub has a built-in module for Jelly, it turns out, which may let us do a full root and boot without a unencrypted boot partition, which of course will preserve boot environments and all that. So that's something we're looking at for 10.02 as well. Work is in progress on that at the moment, and if there's any devs out there who know a little bit of the Grub code and maybe want to hack on it a little bit or help us test stuff, go ahead and get in contact with me. Find my information up on the website. I'm sure you can get a hold of me various different ways. But that's kind of the PCBSD roundup for the week. So we'll be back in just a moment with our weekly feedback and questions. Okay, first up in our feedback, we have a question from Antonio. I'll go ahead and read this one, Alan. So he says, thanks for the great show, guys. Keep up the awesome work. He has a couple of questions. So first of all, he asked something for you, Alan. He mentioned that he uses Puppet for FreeBSD maintenance and configuration management. He wants us to go over some of the basics of advanced Puppet scripts that could help the rest of us get started. Bonus, he would like some FreeBSD or PCBSD examples, since PCBSD uses PBIs and not ports, which we just announced that'll be changing here shortly.
Right, but you always had the option of using ports anyway. So.
Correct. So yeah, that would be maybe a cool tutorial we could do on how to do a little Puppet management.
Obviously, the easiest thing is get the package-ng plugin for Puppet off GitHub. It's also linked on the package-ng part of the FreeBSD wiki. And yeah, as soon as you hook that up, all of a sudden Puppet knows all about how to use packages, and you just say install this, and it grabs it from the repo. And you can I use Puppet to push a repo config that makes it pull from my private repo that has all of the server apps compiled the way I need them. And it works great.
So second half of his question he has here is he says he's interested in TrueOS, but he hasn't heard it mentioned much on the show. Could you explain who the target audience is for it and what additional benefits it has or carries over from a standard FreeBSD server install? So TrueOS is just something included on the PCBSD install media. At installation time, you'll have the option of selecting it. And it's basically a FreeBSD install, except with a bunch of extra packages, everything that maybe a Linux admin would be more familiar with. They want a bash shell out of box, and they want various utilities that will will have available in SureOS. It also includes access to the PCBSD repo pre-configured and all the command line versions of our tools, everything from Life Preserver for doing all your ZFS management and replication, backups and restores, Warden for jail management. And in addition, because you're installing from our media, you get support for boot environments and the way we set that up all out of box on a server.
Awesome.
So, it'll do all that for you. So Grub will be pre-configured so you can create a boot environment and then reboot and select it at the boot prompt.
Nice.
So that's some of the main differences. Nothing that you couldn't do on a FreeBSD box, but it's all set up for you.
Nice.
You don't have to do it all by hand and then go through the tutorials and figure out how to set these things up on a FreeBSD installation.
Cool.
And he asks another question here. He gets that third freebie in. Any news on the BSD Now shirts? Anything
Working on that.
updated on that one? Working on it?
Change the art a bit so that it's not too many colors.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, hopefully we answered your questions there. So I guess next up we have Daniel. So what's he asking?
He's asking about
here?
Puppet as well, actually, Puppet passwords. He says he's been working on switching his small web hosting environment from Linux containers to FreeBSD jails on his FreeNAS box. And he seems to be running... he says when he was running with containers, he had all of his machines connecting to his Samba 4 domain and working with that for single sign-on for internal web applications. And he says he remembers me mentioning using Puppet to manage users and group information, to which he's trying that out. His question is, how do you manage the users and passwords and groups with Puppet? He says he's tried a few times with partial success to have Puppet manage different users for SSH access. However, the problem he's always encountered is the users and groups are added, but the password never seems to work. I sent him an email about this. I think the problem was he was putting the password in his Puppet configuration file. And Puppet expects the hash of the password, right? The cryptographic hash. So it's just like $2A or $6 or whatever. And so that way, the plain text password isn't just sitting in a config file somewhere.
Sure.
And that because when Puppet's using the pw command to set the password, pw is expecting it hashed as well. And so obviously the problem is that that's invalid when you put in the plain text password. And then you should be able to, you can get Samba 4 to work under FreeBSD as well to do sign on that way. But so using Puppet, I sent him a bunch of examples, but you can create the users and groups and everything, and you just set the passwords using the hash rather than the plain text password. And that's really all there is to that. It's just, I guess that's not obvious because the field is called password, not like password hash.
Yeah. Maybe a little better description on there would have been helpful, but cool. Okay. Well, next up from Sean, he's asking about PCBSD VPN is the question. So he says, how would I go about connecting to my work Cisco ASA 5505 or 5510, whatever it is, from his PCBSD desktop? He said it's hard enough to find the Cisco client software for Windows at cisco.com, so I don't think there's a FreeBSD version. So he says he may make his own VPN connection using OpenVPN and bypass Cisco altogether. So what he's asking is there any chance we could do a OpenVPN tutorial? I think we probably could do that. We'll pass that on to TJ, see if that's something we can put on the schedule for the future.
Cisco, I don't know what the VPN's like. If it's just IPsec, you can do it. I'm just not familiar with how.
With the method for it.
But if it's kind of Cisco proprietary, I have no idea. Although,
if somebody knows how to do that out in the audience, though, that would be a great mini tutorial to send in.
You might also try just going to freshports.org and search for Cisco and see if there's something in the ports tree. Because I have a feeling that there are a lot of people that have to use this Cisco VPN stuff.
I think others have run into this.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, let's just do a quick search. There's a bunch of Perl modules for Cisco, fetches configs for Cisco, bunch of configuration tools, but I don't see anything for VPN in the ports tree specifically. But that, again, doesn't mean it can't be done. But again, if you are somebody who's a networking guru and knows how to do this, send us just the walkthrough. It doesn't have to be a nicely formatted tutorial. We can do that and clean it up and get it ready. Just give us the guts of it.
So next up from T-Sin, he says he's really enjoying the show. He started listening in December, and he had to listen to it more than weekly to catch back up. He says he'd like to get a dedicated server or a virtual server to run free or OpenBSD for personal use. He says, do you guys have any suggestions? He's currently looking at Kim Sufi, which is from OVH. He's wondering if we had any specific advice. Not specifically about where to run a VPS. I guess you guys use rootBSD, right? They're also very good.
Yep.
But on to his second question. He says, a few years ago, he ran FreeBSD on a laptop full time. He says he enjoyed the experience of having a FreeBSD box with him since as a small server in his basement. He said, unfortunately, he had to give up running it on a laptop because Wi-Fi was super buggy and would crash pretty frequently. I just noticed that at my local computer store, they're selling the Intel 6205 wireless chip for about $20. So if you have a laptop where you can pull out the wireless card and put in a different one, like on my Lenovo, $20 and you get the Intel one that works flawlessly.
Well, he says here he used the NDIS wrapper for a while. That's your problem right there.
That's not even supported anymore.
That's a pretty iffy way to go.
Yeah, that was the Windows XP drivers, which most of the wireless cards don't come with an XP driver anymore. He says he's looking at a new laptop and would like to go back to running BSD full time. Do we have any recommendations? Not specifically, but if you look up like what model of wireless it has, and then just check the FreeBSD man pages to see if that's a supported one. If you do man IWN, that's one of the Intel drivers, and it has a list of ones that are supported. When I built my Lenovo, I had a choice of like 4 different ones, and I just took the best one that was supported.
Yep. Yeah, we both run Lenovo's T520 here. What's yours? T530?
T530, yeah.
Yeah, and suspend resume works and all that out of box.
Exactly.
I've been really happy with it, so works quite well.
And he says one more question. He says he lives in Toronto. Do I know of any good user group meetings? There is one in Toronto, which I've contemplated going to before, but that's like an hour away from me. I don't know if meetups.com has a couple, but you'd have to search around. You might try just emailing one of the FreeBSD mailing lists and see if anybody knows of one. I know there are a bunch of us around this area, and we might be able, if there isn't one, maybe we can start one.
Cool. Okay, well, last question for the week from Chris asking about FreeNAS drives. He says, hi guys, after playing at home with FreeNAS on its really old hardware and having it not really work because of one component or another, he went and bought one of the new FreeNAS minis from iXsystems. It's such a load off his mind to know that he doesn't have to worry about hardware anymore. Yes, it is very nice, isn't it? So when the mini arrived, he says he popped in the 4 terabyte WD Reds that he already had, and then he went to configure the ZVol. The GUI wanted me to have the drives either in mirrored or RAID Z2. I was originally thinking about a RAID Z1 so I could have approximately 12 terabyte space with some redundancy, but in red lettering it told me that this setup was not optimal. So the question is, why is it not optimal? I could set it that way anyway, but if I'm looking at a performance hit, or is it just a data loss possibility? So what would you say about that,
specifically,
Alan?
It's a bit of a performance hit. ZFS writes to the disks in blocks of 128 kilobytes. So like the record size is 128 kilobytes. So you take that 128 kilobytes, and then it divides that up between the drives, not counting the parity drives. So when you have to take 128 kilobytes and divide that by 3, you get an odd number, or a number with a remainder. You can't divide that evenly into 3. And so that's where the problem comes from. Basically, you need the number of non-parity drives to be a power of 2. So 2, 4, 8, or 16. And so, yeah, using a RAID Z1, you will get less performance. It's not that big of a deal, but basically the way it'll work is it'll take that 128K and split it up into 4 instead, and write one of each to 3 of the drives, and then the 4th block will go to one of the other drives. And that which one gets the extra bit will alternate each time. But basically it means it'll take that much longer to write stuff every time, because it tries to write the whole 128 kilobytes, and so it has to wait for one of the drives to do twice as much work before it can start the next part. So there's a performance hit there, although your drives probably can handle it. Like I have a 6-disc RAID Z2, so that gives me 4 discs to divide that 128 up between properly. And it can do about 600 to 700 megabytes a second, and my gigabit LAN can only do 125 megabytes a second. So a performance hit there might still be, that won't be your bottleneck necessarily if your bottleneck's your network. So you're probably fine doing it with RAID Z1. The other suboptimal is RAID Z1 means if 2 drives die, you're out of luck. But with only 4 drives, a RAID Z1 can work. There will be a performance penalty, but it might not be bad enough that you care. And then RAID Z2 versus mirrors, I go with mirrors because you get more performance for the same amount of storage. So yeah, with 4 4-terabyte drives, I'd probably say you could do the RAID Z1. That's how mine was set up. I had 4 3-terabyte drives, and I did a Z1. But then when hard drives went on sale, I bought 2 more and reformatted it as a Z2, and it was much faster.
Oh, there
but
you go.
the speed is currently limited by my network. Of course, I bought a 4-port card and stick in it and working on bonding that up so I can blast more over the network. He says, with the dual NICs in the Mini, he was going to create a link aggregation group and plug them both into the network. He sounds his switch does not support LACP, so will it still work? FreeBSD in its lag driver has a couple of options. One of them is just round robin, where it'll just keep firing packets out of every other port, which mostly works, although without the switch cooperating, all the traffic is all going to go to one destination. So between one computer and your FreeNAS, you're still going to be limited to 1 gigabit. But if you're if 2 different computers are trying to pull from the FreeNAS, you will be able to get almost 2 gigabits in that configuration.
Cool. He also says thanks for all the info the show puts out. It's been really helpful. We're glad you're enjoying the show out there, Chris.
Thank you.
Excellent. So that's our weekly feedback and questions. We're going to wrap up here. And of course, we want to mention that all the tutorials are going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. So go ahead and check the website out. There might be some older stuff you've missed there.
Yep. And
send your questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the email address we monitor. So try not to hit us via social media. Send it directly in. And also, if you've got something cool to talk about and want to come on for an interview, just shoot us an email. Let us know. We'll try and find a time to schedule you here in the near future.
I'm looking at all the people at BSDCan who promised to call in over Skype and do an interview. Anyway.
How many did you get? Do you approximation?
I got 3 actual interviews there, but I got like 3 more people who promised. Brian Drew, he was too tired. So he's
we're hunting you down after you've had a good night's sleep, Brian. I'm sorry.
And then we'll try to get Lawrence Stewart. He's in Australia, so it'll be a little more finagling to get the time zones to match up. But
Sure. Well, I want to mention, too, next week, Michael Lucas is going to be giving a live presentation on Tuesday called Beyond Security, Getting to Know OpenBSD's Real Purpose. So we'll have a link in the show notes to that. Sure. So be sure to catch that if you can. And also, pre-orders for the book of PF, the 3rd edition, now are up. And we've also got a picture of a bunch of old FreeBSD CDs to show you. Do you have that on the screen now?
No, I've closed that already. Sorry. But you can definitely check the show notes.
You could take a look in the show notes.
Because also doing the news stories, there's a couple of extra links on a bunch of the stuff that we didn't show on the screen, and you'll be able to read more. For example, Michael Lucas's blog, he has the notes he took on a bunch of the other Dev Summit sessions. So if you weren't able to come to the Dev Summit, you can definitely check out. He's got a bunch of notes from ports and packages, although he had to leave early because he was teaching a class after that. And I forget which one of the other sessions he was in.
Cool. Yep. And of course, as we tell you every week, if you can, watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. Watch how we make the show and get to interact a little bit with us during the recording. So that's always fun. And of course, we appreciate having you out there in the audience and following along with BSD Now. We look forward to seeing you guys again next week.